Hello and welcome back to the Handstandcast with me, your host Emmet Lewis, and my co-host here, Mikael Christiansen. How's things going, Mikael?
Yeah, yeah. Same as last time. it's
This last time.
it could be worse, so can't
Yeah,
complain.
we are trapped currently in what I call Wednesday, the 94th of March, and it's we're just been locked down for quite some time. Please send help if you're allowed out of your place. If you're not
Oh,
allowed out of your place, please break out and send help.
yeah. Here we're allowed
Uh,
out, so I've been out. Actually, quite comfy, but yeah, you never know how it's gonna go here.
yeah.
Sweden, they have their way, so let's see if it works or not. I'm certainly not a virologist, so
You're in the
yeah.
perfect age group where it doesn't really matter if you get it or not. You might just
Yeah, though, like
survive.
I had some friends, like I mean, really, really top fit, healthy acrobats that are like they're still smashed like 2 months after they got it. Like they're like physically struggling to get back in shape. So
Yeah, I've heard
mm,
that off a few people who got out just like in shape, grand, and just got taken out good and proper by it. So
yeah, yeah, it
the
doesn't
next
seem to fuck
questions in the
around.
next month, I think, will be how do I get back to handstands after getting the Rona? Well, you don't. So, theme of this episode, as usual, we like to alternate our episodes with a serious one and a answering your questions. As usual, if you have questions for us, please just either DM them to us on Instagram on Handstand Factory, use the contact form on the website, ask me and Mikael, and hopefully you'll learn something, and hopefully we'll get around to answering it. Uh,
Indeed.
so, first question we have today. Let me read my screen here. If I'm just learning to balance on two arms, is it a bad idea to be trying to balance while on blocks and canes in addition to my primary work, which is just on the floor? The variation feels good, but I wonder if I'm just creating confusion because the push happens in different parts of my hands when I'm using different props, or maybe that confusion is actually a productive learning path. What has been your experience?
Sounds to me like I mean, shouldn't be anything wrong with that. Like my initial thought was just like, are you able to get up on canes? But if you are, then that's good. Like you'll likely be learning slightly different things from all the three elements, and they'll all contribute, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely it's one of those things I'm actually quite in favor of quite early. Once people are beginning to get a bit of balancing, is to start using blocks, generally blocks on the floor.
Yeah, mostly.
And my own personal reason to this is a lot of tendonitis and overuse injuries come from just repeating the same stress on the body and not getting adequate recovery. Whereas the blocks and parallettes as well, they provide a different stress on the forearms. So by alternating them over the course, you get it's definitely been like a significant reduction in like tendonitis and elbow owies that I've got with my students when I started forcing them to do this. So I'm totally in favor of this. I think it's a great thing to do.
Mm.
Keep it up, really.
Yeah, I think there's not that much more to say about that. Like as long as you feel that all three of them are contributing, it shouldn't really. I mean, it's definitely not going to make things worse. So it'll just prepare you for being able to use all of them at the later stage.
Yeah, because one of those things like it's first you got to learn to balance on them, and then there's all the drills and techniques using the actual objects that are
Mm.
kind of unique to the object. That are obviously block walking and these kind of block transitions for one arm drills, and then obviously all the stuff on canes. So the more comfortable you are on them, when by the time you get to needing to use them for training, then you're already set, I suppose.
Mm.
Next
Exactly.
question. Hey guys, something I wanted you guys to discuss because it's been really hard for me and my training partner to answer this topic. What is the correct amount of training needed to make progress until you just train for hours and hours and it can be the same as an hour a day? Because we just don't know when to stop and call it a day. It's almost an obsessive thing happening. Someone has got the obsessive compulsive handstand disease, it
Yes.
seems.
I mean, a very normal symptom of doing handstands, I guess.
Yeah.
It is literally impossible to answer. Like, what it'll depend on so many factors that we need to kind of know your entire training history, what you're working on, and so on to be able to accurately say anything. But like, I mean, and it depends. Like, there are very many ways of tracking progress as well, as we've spoken about before. But I mean, if you feel that you are learning and that incrementally over the months you are getting better, then you're likely doing enough. It's easier to know what isn't a very good idea, and that is doing way too much. Like, that is, on average, not a very good idea to train 7 days a week for 4 hours a day. Like, it is not going to end well for anyone.
Yeah. I think it's also one of those things, like it depends on what level you're training at. If you have the capacity for, on an extreme end, say you can do one arm for multiple sets and multiple shapes, and you can do multiple reps of press, well then taking a day where you train for 6 hours and you're only doing 2 arm handstands and you're just working on your refinement and your shapes, or you're working choreography, or you're exploring potentialities, then you're kind of safe. On the other side of that, it's like if you are trying to learn a one arm and you haven't really got the capacity yet and you haven't got the strength for it, and then you decide, I'm just going to keep doing, I'm going to set myself a goal, I'm going to do a 100 minutes of one arm attempts, well then you're likely to blow something. So
Yeah.
there is this relative capacity and how hard the skill is for you versus how hard you can work.
Yeah,
So it's
and
definitely
and also, like, depending on, like, if you're, I think you should perhaps rethink a bit and make sure that the things you are working on are contributing towards what you want to be learning. And this is kind of a common thing that, like, okay, I have established a hand balancing practice. First, I start with 3 sets of 2 minutes, 2 arms. Then I do tuck up 15 times, straddle up 15 times. Then I do fingertip shifts, one side, other side, one side, other side. Then legs together. Then this, that, blah, 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 blah. Is this really helping you with what you want to achieve? Or is it just busy work that you are doing because it seems like a good idea? So make sure that you're choosing drills that are actually bringing you closer to the target thing that you're working on. Now I used kind of a example of someone who wants to work or are working on one arm. For people that do such a routine, I usually say, well, you don't need to waste a ton of energy and time on standing on 2 arms for endurance. Spend that energy wisely on working on the drills that are closer to your technical limit where you need to work. And occasionally you can do more on kind of the more basic elements, but it's very easy to just, like, throw away a lot of energy.
Yeah, basically. It's also like, it's one of the things that also comes into this is workout pace. Like, how much are you resting? How spread out is your workout? If you're like, if you're treating it to quote a Mikaelism, handstand training should be like a tea party. So if you're kind of, doing a handstand, checking your phone, doing a bit of stretching, going back, trying a handstand, chatting to your friend, asking them what they're doing, giving them some feedback, asking some feedback, then trying something else out, then your workout pace is very slow and casual, and you can actually do a very long workout at that kind of pace. Whereas if your workout was like, I'll do 60 seconds on, 60 seconds off on the clock, and then you'll slowly burn yourself out very quickly. I remember, just to relate to two of my students, I had two of my students come visit me. They were training in the States and they're pretty good. They're getting to 1 arms. It was Josh Morgan for 2 of the models actually on the programs on Push Harder.
Very strong.
And they came to train. Yeah, they came to train with me in person in Berlin, and this was just about the time they were getting their 1 arms and needed some tweaks, and they're beginning to get good. And they came over to train with me. Now, normally they were telling me, oh yeah, we were training 4 hours a day, and the sessions were taking 4 hours. So I was like, okay, guys, let's try. So I brought them over to the pace I work out at, and what I mainly encourage people to work out, which is brisk, but not too brisk. These way I describe it, it's a 2-hour session, but by the end of an hour, they were dying on the first couple of days of this because they were not used to actually just working at the pace I was getting them to work at. So it is definitely like, it was for me, it was quite interesting as a coach just to see the effect of, 2 conditioned athletes and just changing the pace slightly of the workout and how it trashed them. So it's definitely that's one thing to consider in this, is like, is my handstand training partly a social session as well, and I'm having a lot of fun?
Exactly. But as you hear, like, it's not a question that we can, like, answer with any type of accuracy. So it's kind of more like general suggestions around how you practice rather than saying what is enough. Like it is way too unspecific a question in terms of the amount of knowledge we can have about any person that we don't work with at this time.
Cool. From the same guy. He's getting greedy with 2 questions, but we'll do it anyway because we're nice. Another topic. The self-imposed pressures of training every week, 5 days a week. The pressure is stressful. Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
It's definitely, I think there's one of those things. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, continue.
It's one of those things that there is a tendency, particularly when you get really into something, to start putting pressure on yourself. And, you hear the stories like this person trains 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, and then on weekends he does 12 hours a day because he has a bit of extra time, and blah, blah, blah. It's easy to put a lot of pressure to train a lot, and what we're really looking for is our productive training, not quantity. So you have to also go like, sometimes it would be better just to take an extra day off if you're feeling a bit wrecked and just go, you know what, I have allowances and I can give myself this allowance to actually just take some time off and take a rest. It's much better long term for your physical development, for your mental health development as well.
Yeah,
Sometimes
all that kind of beating yourself up thing and like trying to create some sort of superhero schedule, it's usually nonsense. Like, yes, there are people that train a lot. I mean, there are people that train extreme amounts, but like, how can you, like, it's easy to assume this person trains 6 hours a day, that's why they're good. Or is it just like, yeah, they have developed to become very good, and now they're spending an enormous amount of time, maybe a lot more than necessary on their training. Like, it doesn't mean that you need to put in that much time. And especially, I mean, if this pressure is making you not feel great about your training, well, then it's obvious. It's making you not feel great about your training, so then you should change it. Like, one thing that I've seen perhaps more consistently than anything else through all the years that I've done various physical practices within breaking and within circus and so on, and not only my own discipline, the people that get really good are the people that don't fuss and stress way too much about every single little detail. Like it's what I call optimizers. Like the people that have to control every tiny variable about their training, or else they go crazy. Like, they spend a lot of time controlling all these variables, and it's like, spend the time training and practicing instead. Most of the ones that I've seen get really good, they have kind of a more relaxed approach to it, which means they're not going to freak out if they miss a day of training and all this. And I'm very guilty of being exactly that guy that tries to train. Like, I fucking train 7 days a week, like 365 days a year for 7 years. It didn't help at all. Like, I did that, and I performed. Yeah, I performed through that period. It's a miracle I didn't get fully destroyed. I never, ever rested. Still, like, last time I had 5 days off was in 2012. Like, yes, I'm not kidding. Like, yes, I do have a high capacity, but like, I've learned through basically, like, okay, well, it helps me nowhere, and it won't you either. So, like, building a better relationship with what you enjoy to do is definitely the way to go.
Yeah, it also just keeps you, unless you have the super obsessive compulsive personality type that will stay engaged with something, just having a bit of freedom, because it's such a shame when you see this with people who they get too obsessed to their practice and they mentally burn themselves out with it before they reach their wanted level, and then they just can't do it anymore and they lose the enjoyment. It's much better to kind of, there's a phrase I heard somewhere, I can't remember where, someone can probably inform me, that passions are cultivated, and that you can't just get a passion for something overnight, a true passion. You have to slowly grow it like you grow in your garden, and cultivate it and trim away, and then over the years it will grow and be a passion. But it's not something, if you get it too fast, it burns itself out because it doesn't have a foundation. So if you want, if you have high aspirations for handball or anything really, doing too much at the start is detrimental, in my opinion.
Take your time. I mean, it's the only ones that really need to stress particularly much about it are the people that are like in circus school and want to do go to the big circus festival next year and kind of do all their crazy shit because they're still young and kind of in that level. But like even they, like there's just relax. I mean, it's definitely a better solution.
Cool. Next question. As a beginner, I find it hard to practice with distractions, people walking around me, etc. I lose focus and then the leg or shoulder drifts and I fall out of the handstand. When does it become second nature?
Yeah, good question. That's actually an interesting one. I haven't experienced that in very, very, very many years. It's actually the first time I've thought about that possibly being a problem for someone in a long time. But yeah, I mean, if you're distracted, maybe it's good at least for a while to find somewhere where you have less distractions, especially if you work on the technical things. But at one point when some people will probably also be more susceptible to being distracted by certain things than others. And if you are in close proximity of such things and you work on something that demands high concentration, you will likely be distracted. While if you work on something that doesn't require your max amount of concentration, it won't be an issue, I guess. So what do you think, Emmet?
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like I'm definitely one of those people who depending on the day, environment wrecks me in terms of, you've been to the gym I train at over here. It's just like a clusterfuck of PT shouting at people, and some days I'm able to train through it perfectly, and other days it's just like it's hell. It's literal hell to try and get any training in it. A lot of time I have walked out of the gym just going, I'm not training today, fuck this shit. Goes back to taming your passions in the past one. But yeah, it's definitely I think concentration and focus are actually a cultivatable skill, but they're also a finite skill. So you can concentrate, you can train concentration as a mind quality just by itself, like meditation, but not quite, where you'll just pick something to pay attention to. I don't know. I would with people I work with on the other kind of Taoist training I train people in, I'd get a red ball or just get something. A red ball is traditional, and just focus on this, and you train yourself to get like a cone-like focus on this object, so it's the only thing in your sensory awareness. And you can train it, and like you first start doing it and you can't concentrate for 20 seconds even, and eventually you're able to hold the ball with like nothing else leaking in for 30-40 minutes. So it's this idea of you can pull these things out, you can pull the concentration out. So you can also find that in handstands, that if you can, one thing I do a lot in this thing is activate the cone by finding one spot on the floor and locking my eyeballs onto it to the point where like my eyeballs aren't even moving, and this kind of activates the cone for me, that I can block out the distractions, because the only thing exists is the bit of dust I'm looking at on the floor. So it's something to try, but it's also one of those things, like as Mikael said, find somewhere else what's a bit quieter to practice if you can. I suppose right now in the grips of the Rona it might be hard, but I don't know, get up 4 a.m. to do your training. 5. I think this one's a bit more for me. Is it important to develop internal and external rotation in the hips for splits and pancake? Is it a limiting factor? Yes. Done. In a bit more clear. So if we think about on the side split, I assume this is what you're referring to on the front split, is the legs will be, if you look at just the angulation on somewhere between 70 and 110 degrees of anterior tilt to the pelvis, and somewhere between 45 and 70 degrees of external rotation is where the split will happen for you. How this will look depends on how you set up your splits. If you externally rotate to the max and slide the legs out sideways, as you would do in ballet, and get the knees up to the ceiling type split, then obviously you need a lot of external rotation to get into it. If you go a bit sort of from a horse stance and the knees look like they're going forward and that kind of direction, then you will still have the exact same amount of external rotation. You will just be loading a different segment of the muscles due to the angulation. Internal rotation is a weird beast in these kind of things, that you don't need internal rotation per se to do a split, though sometimes it looks like people are doing it because of whichever way their knees are bending. but it can be very beneficial to train it in terms of comfort. It's basically like training, balancing movement planes. If we are training pushing movements from the body, it's generally a good idea to train pulling movements and vice versa. And it's the same with this. If we're training side split movements, it's generally beneficial to train internal rotation movements. There's a bit of a fetish for internal rotation on the internet at the moment, on saying that if you are lacking internal rotation, you're a bad person, and you will have all these problems. Well, a lot of people who don't have any of those problems have zero internal rotation, so it's questionable. It's one of those things. You also have to look at pain science and what it says about like structures and non-conforming structures and all these kind of things. So, in summation, train it a bit. Train it. If it's a limit, try it out. It's like all these kind of things. You try it out for yourself. Does it work for you? Great. Keep doing more of it. If it doesn't impact anything, then you probably don't need to do it at that moment. Okay, so number 6, a new question. What's your approach to injuries, both in coaching and practicing? Keep up the good work.
Injuries. First of all, trying to avoid them by ensuring that the amount of load that you're able to handle is, or that you keep to, on like in general, what you're able to handle. And this is of course a lot easier said than done. Like when you're coaching people, it feels almost easier to help others than to help yourself. I think that's why in sports people do have coaches. Simply because like there's a lot of things that like you're as an athlete yourself, or like you will also act in effect, and you'll be emotionally bound to what you do. So it's easy to kind of overstep that. And like when you work with a coach, it's easier to kind of follow that and speak with that person, get opinions and so on. So like in a coaching context, I feel it's easier to deal with. Like, for example, if I have people I coach that struggle with, like if I always ask people to tell me, like, inform me on how your wrists are, inform me on how your shoulders are, just so I'll have kind of an idea. Like, even like today, one guy told me, like, his wrist is a bit too sore, like, and it's been like that for a week. And I'm asking him, okay, but then you're going to now see within the next few days how it's feeling, and you're going to do the lower numbers in the program, simply so that you make, at least you reduce the risk of what can happen. And if you then need to take days off, then you take days off, because like it's always better to just scale back before you end up with like a more significant injury. So it's definitely difficult, and having had injury and like currently still having an injury myself, it's a very difficult and bumpy ride. It's all like injuries are also very how to say specific, such as like, let's say like right now, for example, for me, like I have a shoulder issue that goes up and down, and I'm handling. And I know that this is something I need to specifically take care of. While today in my practice, I pulled some muscles around my ribs on the left side. I know that this will be fine, because I've done the exact same thing very many times, and I stopped practicing after that happened. Like, and tomorrow I will likely feel 90%. If I don't feel that good, I'm going to not do certain movements. So it's something that you really need to learn to deal with over time. And I think that experience is the key factor there, and listening to other people with experience.
Yeah, it's also just one of those things that depends on the injury. Like, the problem is there's the Goldilocks problem of healing injuries, that you need to rest, but not too much. You need to move, but not too much. You need to reintroduce the movement that caused the initial injury, but not too much. And it's kind of one of these balancing factors that it's very easy when you're coaching yourself, I suppose, just to do too much. It's the number one cause of people injuries just dragging out too long when people are coaching themselves. And if you're trying to rehab the injury yourself, it's just you do too much instead of just giving it a little bit. So it's always good to get, if it's something small that you've had before, you go, oh, okay, I've tweaked my wrist in this way and it'll be fine in a week. That's fine, you know what to do. But if it's something new or something you're unfamiliar with or something you're even concerned about, it's better to get a second opinion from a physio and have a clear like roadmap of going like, okay, you're going to do this, this, and this, and then you'll build your capacity back up. And that kind of thing can just, having someone you trust and go, okay, I'm just going to follow the plan, and then follow the plan as well. This is the other thing with if you get a good plan from a physio, follow it. Don't just go, oh yeah, that's a great plan. Do it until you feel better. And they said, oh yeah, do this for 6 weeks as an example, and you feel better on week 2, and you just stop doing the plan. It's like, no. Keep going for another few weeks, because that's when you're going to get the benefit from it. So yeah, I suppose that's it. There's no real one true way. You do have to blunder through it yourself. Don't panic, I suppose, and then keep going. Cool. Next question. This one kind of leads into our next episode on the podcast, which is about the one-arm handstand. So I'll put this one up because we can get to it. I would like to know, what's the difference in terms of benefits between practicing flags and practicing transfer of weight to one arm with finger supports?
Practicing flags, as in, I assume we're talking about the terminology of the Handstand Factory program of then deep side flexions here, like deep flags.
Yeah, it's hard to go. So I think maybe we should just define the flag, because it's one of these things. We have the term side flexion flag, and it causes a bit of confusion as well for people not used to our terminology. It's like flagging, side flexion are basically the same. Flag is the idea of shifting into a side flexion, and going deeper and deeper is into like more of a classic deep flag. But if you're setting up a one arm, this is one of these things people think, oh, you don't flag into one arm, you just shift the weight over. And maybe this is what the person is getting at, is in a one arm handstand, in basically all cases, you have to have the hips at a diagonal angle, and this is a flagging action. All that happens is when you start shifting the weight and pushing correctly, is the spine will straighten out. So it's a 2-stage process the way we teach it, whereas other coaches will teach these things to come at once, whereas there's arguments for and against it. And this is, you have to do both. In terms of flagging, from center and out, center to one side, back to center, this is your lateral rebalancing action in a one-arm handstand. So you have to practice it same you would to heel pulls and toe pulls, but at the same time, there's a range that you, I don't know, just we'll make up some numbers here. Say you need 45 degrees of hip tilt. If that's your pure maximum flagging capacity, then for one arm, then if you go 55 degrees, you'll fall out to the side. Whereas if you can flag 65 degrees and then back, then when you hit your 45 degree thing, you have a bit of leeway to drop into before you lose your handstand. So it's definitely an idea of building a bit of capacity here.
Yeah, it's continue.
Yeah, the other thing is, there's two different in a 2-arm handstand flagging, there's 2 different shoulder configurations we have to look at as well. There's a flagging action where the weight will shift onto one arm, similar to a one-arm handstand. And then there's a flagging action where the weight will stay centered in the hands, nearly 50-50, 60-40 or something like that, due to a lateral translation of the shoulders, and the shoulders stay level and not come up to an angle. So, you have to be able to do both, in my opinion, to master hand balancing.
Yeah.
To become master of hand balance. So
yes,
definitely
the way that's is ideally speaking, you're able to easily touch the floor with your toe in a wide straddle and bring it back up the center, kind of. That is something to strive for if you're learning the one arm, regardless, just so that you're sure that you do have the ability to flex very much in the side and still be controlling your entire hip from the upper body. So you should have quite some range towards the floor there, and the more power you have there, the better you are off. You don't need to have extreme amount of it to be able to learn one arm, but some of it, like Emmet mentioned, is very important. So, like, what is important there is that you find a, like, is it the amount that a person will then flag and do their one arm shape in will be up to the person. It'll be up to structure. It'll be up to how high that person prefers to push their shoulder. Like on average, a low shoulder position in a one arm will equal a kind of flaggy looking one arm where the hips are hanging on the side. If you look at b-boys, they very often do that. Like arm is bent, the shoulders position is far from the head, very low, and the hip is very far out. The opposite is someone who has a very, very high push in the shoulder and almost no tilt in the hip. So you'll need to find this on like what works the best for you, but on average you'd want to set up this diagonal and push high through the shoulder, as that will most of the time give you the best of both worlds there in terms of being able to balance both on the inside and the outside of the one arm handstand.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're basically talking about the same thing, I suppose, or
yeah,
just different skills you need to be able to master to achieve the one arm. And last question. This is a good one, actually. I think it appealed to a lot of people. Muscle hypertrophy or building muscle with handstand training? Question mark. So, how do we build muscle while handstand training? Well, can you do it with handstand training? Probably not directly. You can build the hand balance muscles, I suppose.
Yeah,
forearms.
you train a lot of handstands, you'll get some upper body muscle, but it's not going to build at the same rate or anything as if you have kind of like a solid gym split or like calisthenics or something. But I think like one thing that I'd like to say about that, like I think a little bit too many are trying to chase too many goals at the same time. Like the deeper down the rabbit hole you go with hand balancing, the more time it'll take. And if you try to then do your one arm chin up and go like increase on your bench press and all these things at the same time, like it's going to be rough. Like the amount of recovery and the amount of time you need to spend on it is going to likely exceed your capacity. So I think that if you're taking your hand balancing training seriously, at least past the general 2-arm handstand, I think that hypertrophy of like upper body muscles should be kind of not that much of a priority at that given time, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely it's one of these ones, like with my hand balance specialist trainees, who even if they need to gain a bit of muscle, then generally they'll only train sort of bodybuilding type movements. This could be like bodyweight movements as well as weight movements. They'll only train that once a week, and then they'll let the kind of hand balance, because they need the capacity for hand balance. That training takes up so much time.
Yeah.
One interesting strategy I will just throw out there is this one. This one is very difficult to implement unless you have someone overseeing your programs, such as myself or someone else who understands these concepts. But we can use weight and cyclical cutting and bulking diet to reinforce our structured hand balance training. So what this would mean is we will spend some time gaining skills. Let's say I'll throw some numbers out. We will go, say a person can do a 10-second one arm for multiple sets. And then we will take their weight up on a kind of bulking diet, gaining mass, gaining mass. At that time, I will not be letting them push the duration or the volume of training measured in seconds. So that will be maintaining, but because they're increasing mass, their body will be getting stronger essentially in these positions. So that's working as our progressive overload. Then we cut, and that's when we start introducing new elements to the repertoire or increasing time. So we've gone up, whatever, 5% body weight. Then we're cutting the fat we've accrued on that. Cut the fat, start introducing elements. Now they get down to a lower body weight. That's when we'll increase the hold time and the new elements, get them up for a stabilization phase of 4 to 6 weeks, then start bulking again and increment this up. And this could be quite successful, but it's very, you have to be all in. Like, it's one of those ones, like you have to be game for tracking, you have to be tight on these things. it's very easy to mess it up, but it's very effective approach. And if you're interested in reading about it, I remember I picked it up from the Australian Sports Institute or something like that, one of the national sporting bodies in Australia for athletics training. And they were talking about how they cycle, particularly with their women competitors, they cycle their body weight and body fat levels over the year. So over thing, and then they bring them down to their optimal weight for their event and optimal body fat leading up to the peaking season for the event. But then over the rest of the year, they'll use the body weight like to a more sustainable, hormonally friendly level to keep performance and keeps cumulative fatigue at bay. So it's quite interesting. I've implemented it with a few people over the years. That's how I got Josh and Morgan so jacked for that photo shoot. Took about a year to do. But it's difficult to do. It's definitely a difficult thing to implement. You'd have to be all in on your training and not wanting to have a social life. Social life. Who needs it? Right. That is the end of our questions for today.
Right.
Where are we at? Oh, good 40 minutes in. Excellent. So, sweet. Mikael, shall we say goodbye, I suppose?
Yes, I guess it is time.
Cool. So, thank you all for listening in and listening to us ramble. If you want to train a bit of hand balance, you want to listen to our glorious voices a bit more, this time with video, you can always pick up our programs at handstandfactory.com. Other than that, thanks for tuning in. If you like it, tell your friends you like it. If you don't like it, tell your enemies you like it. Other than that, have a good day.